I'm Australian and I want to learn about the world. And what better way to do that than actually watch videos and stories from people that are actually in the world? So today we're actually going to be watching a video or reacting to a video from Large Man Abroad. He has done a video basically highlighting the Australian fuel crisis at the moment, and majority of it's correct. However, look, it's nuanced from a US perspective, and I'd like to give it that Australian flavour, kind of give it a perspective from an Australian and potentially push back on a few points that he makes that I suppose I don't really resonate with, and a couple of other people don't resonate with either in Australia. Nothing against him, but just basically we're looking at it from our perspective.
And the crisis that it faces right now, because it's one that has really been posed on it by our country. But it's fascinating to watch the politics in the moment right now.
So what he's basically saying then is that the fuel crisis that's currently ravaging Australia, probably ravaging the world, to be brutally honest, is a direct result of the US war in Iran. Yes, that is a contributing factor, and very much so. A lot of places, probably in Australia included, but what he's looking at is one single point of failure. And to be completely honest, that's not really what has actually happened. So if we really delve into it, Australia doesn't have that many oil refineries to actually process the oil to make them into fuel. 2005 and 2006, we actually had about, I think it was 8 refineries from memory. Then in 2006, all but 2 closed. So we're actually been running on 2 oil refineries to make fuel for the entirety of Australia for the best part of the last 20 years. Who's to blame for this? Personally, I would blame the government. So those last 2 fuel refineries are heavily subsidised from the government. They're probably running at a loss, primarily because they're not competitive with the Asian market. And that's what led the other 6 to close. So if you kind of break down the demographic of the political parties over that period of time, you almost break it to half and half. So half Liberal, half Labor over that 20-year period. So yes, the US has contributed to this, but I look at it from a perspective is that the US ripped off the Band-Aid of a festering wound.
Is people really do try to figure out how to survive during the energy crisis that the United States has put them into. So for those who don't know, Australia imports about 90% of its oil, and there's been a rash of gas stations, petrol stations, that have...
Yeah, so we don't really have that many oil reserves in Australia. From what I've researched, we're quite heavy in coal, LNG, which is natural gas. We export majority of our natural gas. Might do a future video on that. But we import, and primarily our products do come from the Strait of Hormuz, or they go through the Strait of Hormuz. So he is correct in the sense that we do import 90% of our oil. Yeah, so I was going to release this video last week, but we're now on Easter Monday, so I wanted to kind of give it a bit of see how it flowed out over the Easter break. I was just reading a news article, and I will put it up here, that a lot of service stations in Australia, in New South Wales, I'm in Canberra, did run out of petrol yesterday. So I think it was 150 around that memory, and from diesel, and around about 50 that actually ran out of fuel entirely, completely bone dry. So we will be talking about the Prime Minister's address a little bit later in the video, because he does touch on it. And this could potentially be seen as a cause and effect from Albo's speech per se, because he was saying, hey, look, continue your holidays, continue your Easter, do whatever you need to do, go out, fuel up as per normal. A lot of other countries in the world, from my research, have been basically working from home, almost kind of like COVID lockdown style measures to try and ration out their fuel and push it out as long as they can. But we've been informed by our benevolent overlord, Albo, to go forth and do what you normally do. Imagine for a second if you were like me. I drive a diesel car. You were driving around New South Wales, you went to a service station, it was bone dry, and I dare say it would have been a couple of service stations in that proximity that was bone dry. So good job.
completely run out of diesel, or have at least run out of one kind. They have had record prices in diesel and fuel they're on borrowed time.
Yeah, we are on borrowed time. So going back all those little bit ago to the fuel and refinery thing, we actually had a really, really, really healthy stockpile of fuel. So basically these refineries, in addition to refining oil into fuel, actually had storage facilities. So like I was saying, we've really gone down to 2 storage facilities, and I'm not too sure how big they are. However, what's happened now is we literally use Singapore, we use South Korea, we use a couple of other states, I think Malaysia as well, to refine our fuel and bring it down. If they're not getting the oil product to refine, we're quite low on the list, because they obviously want to be servicing their own countries first, which does hurt. And we're also a part of an international agreement or a pact that we would be maintaining, all member states of this pact would be maintaining 90 days of fuel reserves. Australia in March had about 29 or 39 days fuel reserves, so well, even half of below what's expected of these states or these member states in this pact. So it's not really looking good. And I think what it comes down to is that, we will touch on Albo's video a little bit later, as I said before, but it's been that continual shift of blame. So like I was saying before, it was 10 years apiece of both governments dwindling the fuel reserves over that period of time. And it just so happens that Labor's been caught out with its pants down.
And this is a reality for the Australian people, and this is something they know. But I juxtapose that with America. Last night, the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, addressed the nation. But he addressed the nation in a way that our President of the United States doesn't address the nation. He talked to them directly. He validated what's happening. He tried to bring the people together.
So this is the crux of the video. If you go on social media, you'll actually see that it wasn't received like that. A vast majority of Australians, myself included, I didn't personally watch the video. I did catch up on it after the fact. And it wasn't so much a discussion talking with us or talking, giving us an update. It was very condescending. It was very spoken to us like we're kindergartens, and very broken language, and almost not acknowledging the reason behind the crisis. Like I was saying before, is that this has been a dwindling asset or resource over the last 20 years. It wasn't brought up to say, hey, look, we're stuffed up. This is what we're going to do to fix it. It's a case of saying, hey, look, we expect you to pick up the pieces, start, assisting your other Australians and all your friends and all those different things.
Instead of just causing division.
My fellow Australians, by nature, we're an optimistic country, but I understand that right now it's hard to be positive. The war in the Middle East has caused the biggest spike.
So if you listen to Albo's speech patterns, I don't know, I haven't seen this really brought up very much, but he speaks in a tone or a dialect, I suppose you could say, that's not actually his own. He's speaking, I have seen people saying that he's written a ChatGPT speech, or ChatGPT told him this is a good idea.
Like in petrol and diesel prices in history. Australia is not an active participant in this war, but all Australians are paying higher prices because of it. I know that you're seeing this at the servo and at the supermarket, and I understand farmers and truckies, small businesses and families are doing it tough. And the reality is, the economic shocks caused...
It's going to get worse. So he's basically saying we're doing it tough and all those different things, but it's only the start of the cycle. And like I was saying a little bit before, is that we actually had quite a healthy fuel reserve. I think I've seen 200, 300 days of fuel reserve at one stage being stored in this thing. Yes, if we are relying on that oil product to come through, maybe over 200 days or 150 days or something like this, the prices would start creeping up, because obviously we're burning through our reserve, but it wouldn't have been immediate like it is now.
Caused by this war will be with us for months. Tonight I want to speak directly with you about what the government is doing to shield Australia.
I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like it's, when he says months, I'm probably thinking years. It's going to be a while before this recedes. Like I was saying, I kind of think this is his opportunity to, put a dampener on the fire or something like this before it flares up, and obviously the blame shifts to him. the way that, and Large Man Abroad touches this later in his video, which we won't go over, but the US political cycle follows the 24-hour news cycle, and we're exactly the same. This kind of thing is that when this ramps up, when this gets traction, it could potentially lead to Albo, challenging a leadership challenge. So I think he's trying to, quell it, kind of do all those different things, because the COVID restrictions that were in Australia were quite not well received. And I do think if we do go to a similar thing because of this fuel rationing, primarily due to the government's ineptness, if you will, and they were probably hoping to see how this thing could last long, or and hopefully not be in power at the time, before something hit the fan. But I do think, at the very least, we probably will lose our energy minister, or at the very most, probably the Prime Minister will have to resign. We'll see.
In these uncertain times. And also, what all of us can do to help our country and help each other in the period ahead. On Monday, National Cabinet adopted the National Fuel Security Plan. Leaders from both sides of politics, from right around the country, working together to keep Australia moving, making sure that we are prepared so that if the global situation gets worse.
I think he was forced into that. So what he does talk about here is reducing the fuel excise. We pay a tax on fuel, plus in addition to that we also pay a GST, which is kind of, if you're in America, think of it as an inclusive sales tax. So everything we buy, with the exception of a few products, has a 10% GST component, or GST sales tax built into that price. So if the price is $100, the base price, it'll be $110. My math isn't crack hot, but you get the picture. We don't pay it in addition to the ticket price. It's actually included. So he's reduced the fuel excise by 26%, or 26 cents, to try and bring that cost of fuel down. But we'll see how it plays out.
And our fuel supplies are seriously disrupted over the long term. We can coordinate the next steps together. Today, we cut the fuel excise in half, cutting the tax on every litre of petrol by 26 cents.
I kind of feel like the horse has bolted. And the way that this televised speech was received wasn't very well. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier in the video as well, is that not only were we spoken to like kindergartens, this information was circulating wildly on Monday. So this video came out Wednesday night from memory, and it was 2 days in the news cycle. Majority, unless you were living under a rock, you probably would have already heard about this stuff. So there was no new information. This kind of brief or presentation or speech, or whatever you want to call it, from the Prime Minister is a very, very, very seldom thing. From my memory, the last one was done in COVID, and the one prior to that was the GFC. So that kind of gives you an idea of how often the Prime Minister addresses all of Australia. And for him to not to do anything new or give some more information as to what's already known. A lot of people were expecting work from home, or different, filling up days, in the sense of, odds and evens and all those different things. But it was just the same information. And social media went bananas, as you can.
Those savings have started showing up at your petrol station. For our truckies, we have cut the heavy vehicle road user charge to zero. Both these measures will be in place for the next 3 months. We are working to bring the price of fuel down.
But how do you do that? Obviously, cutting the fuel excise is a short-term sugar hit, which people obviously get that dopamine hit. They love it. Obviously, we'll probably do a lot better in the polls for our beloved Albo, but it's something that's short-term. And once that 3 months is up, and that fuel excise of 26 cents goes back on top, we currently, I think from me, I'm paying about $3 a litre for diesel at the moment. I think it's about $14, $15 a gallon in the States, from an Australian perspective. Once you put 26 on top of that, it becomes about $3.25. But 3 months down the track, fuel might be $4 or $5 a litre. So work out what's going on from there.
To make more fuel here and to keep it on shore, and get more fuel here, using our strong trading relationships with our region to bring more petrol, diesel and fertiliser to Australia.
So he wants to bring more fertiliser, more fuel, more oil to the Australian region. it's a supply and demand scenario in the sense that we're going to be paying more for that oil. We may not be a high priority. Like I said before, the refinery countries were obviously going to be servicing themselves, so they will be looking after their own people first. We do export a lot of products like LNG, natural gas, coal and all these different things that could potentially be used as a dangle or carrot. However, we as an Australians don't really see that or the benefits of that. We do not tax these companies appropriately. They pay bugger all royalties, and there's a lot of videos and a lot of channels that talk about the royalties from that perspective. So there is no carrot and stick from that perspective. What I would have liked to see out of this address is for him to basically acknowledge the issue, B, say, hey, this is what's going forward, and C, this is how we're going to deal with it over the next 15, 20 years. Like I was saying before, we're stuck in the 24-hour news cycle, gets a sugar hit, worry about it 3 months down the track.
Now, it's the Australian way that people want to do their bit. And there are simple ways that you can. You should go about your business and your life as normal. Enjoy your Easter. And if you're hitting the road, don't take more fuel than you need, just fill up.
So he's shifting blame now. So he's basically saying the Australian public are the ones responsible for this. If you look between the lines, obviously we're wanting to help other people, help your fellow Australians and all these different things. It's not necessarily, it's basically, hey, we're being spoken to like a naughty child. That's the way it's perceived for me.
Like you normally would. Think of others in your community, in the bush and in critical industries. And over coming weeks, if you can switch to catching the train or bus or tram to work, do so. That builds our reserves and it saves fuel for people who have no choice but to drive. Farmers and miners.
The issue with public transport, especially here in Canberra, I'm going to sound like hard done by, but unless you are very close to a transport hub, public transport's not a relevant or not a reality of something we can use. So Canberra, the state legislature, the local government here, shut down a lot of their further out transport services. So unless you're on the main transport hubs and wanting to probably spend 3 or 4 hours a day each way for something that will take a 15, 20-minute drive a day, that's probably the reality. Even more so for regional New South Wales and all around Australia.
And tradies who need diesel every single day. And all those shift workers and nurses who do so much for our country. The months ahead may not be.
I like how he throws the shift workers and nurses into the mix. The nurses, police, ambulance, all these different things are generally the feel sorry for the people. So obviously shifting the blame to the Australian public, but hey, you need to look after the nurses and all these different things. Nurses aren't paid that well. This is a critical emergency service. To use them as a pawn wasn't very, very well received from my perspective. Like, I personally wouldn't have used them. I would have said, hey, look, not particularly single out any particular occupation or industry. Go forward, go from that perspective. If anything, farmers and tradies and all these different things, maybe potentially, but...
Easy. I want to be upfront about that. No government can promise to eliminate the pressures that this war is causing. I can promise we will do everything we can to protect Australia.
So another get out of jail free card for him then. So basically saying no government could potentially have foreseen this coming or get out of it. And yes, the Americans did play a part in that. I'm not talking about the American public. Love the American public. I have a lot of American friends, a lot of US friends, same country, a lot of Canada friends from previous work and previous things that I've done overseas. I'll leave it at that. You can probably read between the lines. But, it's primarily their ruling class, the administration, all these different things. So by all means, Australians, do not blame the Americans.
From the worst of it. These are uncertain times, but I'm absolutely certain of this. We will deal with these global challenges the Australian way, working together and looking after each other, as we always have. Thank you and good evening.
When the President of the United States gets up on stage in front of the camera and gives his State of the Union, 90% of it is usually a condemnation of the other side, casting blame on everything that's happening in our country.
So I'm going to leave the video there. Thanks again to Ladies Man Abroad for basically bringing it to the attention of the world. I will probably leave that last comment in there, the condemnation, if I could speak, of the other party. That is generally what happens in politics in Australia as well. That is not exclusive to America, probably not exclusive to a lot of countries. We're nowhere near the level of insanity that's going on in America at the moment. However, we're close behind. I personally like to look at it from a perspective is that we're probably 10 to 15 years behind the US. Our last election last year, the opposition, which is the Liberal government, their leader ran on Trumpisms. So he wanted to install a lot of Trump-esque policies and kind of rule by that Orwellian iron fist. Unfortunately for him, the election was held in May, and Trump's, I suppose, true colours, for lack of a better term, or whatever you want to call it, did come out before then, and Australians said, hey, look, we do not want this. See you later. And that member of parliament did lose his own seat because of it. And quite honestly, the Liberal Party hasn't recovered from that. They had been literally beaten to a pulp, which has led the Labor Party, which is the current government at the moment, which Albanese is the leader of, the Prime Minister, to have a supermajority, I suppose, for liking from between us and America, which in itself becomes a lot problematic because there's no real opposition to hold them account, keep them on their toes from that perspective. They can just push through legislation, push through laws without doing the due diligence. And as we can see from that video, there was no acknowledgement, hey, look, with us and them, this is the reason behind it, this is what we're going to do, we're going to push for companies to open up and all these different things. That was none of that. It was really kind of, it could have been an email.